Good morning. I want to thank Ken and all of you for indulging me today and inviting me to speak on spirituality and work. Back in the 80s, some of us were alive then, back in the 80s, a friend of mine and I did a bunch of work on the holiness of ordinary life. And one of the areas that we used to do retreats on, one of the nights, was a spirituality of work. And I'll start with a short story that happened to us in Rochester, New York. We were in Rochester, New York, and if you know Rochester and Elmira and all those places, is where they make Corning glass. And we were doing one night, and there were about 300 or 400 people in the group, and we were doing this evening on work. And I did my little routine that you're going to see a snippet of, and before we got done and we asked any questions, a guy stood up, always an old white guy. We always feel great agency. So we can stand. He stood up in the middle of all of this and said, "I don't understand. I'm a quality engineer over here at Corning Glass, and I measure this and that and the other thing, and I don't understand this, what you're talking about work. I do mathematics, and I do quality control, and all of that." And that's exactly the kind of reaction that we want, of course. And before my partner and I could respond, a woman on this side, on the other side, stood up and as loud as he had talked said, "But I can tell you exactly why your work is so holy and sacred and good." He said, "My work is that I listen to people every day. And while I'm listening to people, I drink tea. And I make tea out of your quality in your teapots. In your teapots, and I've been doing it for 40 years. And I've been using the quality teapots that you make for 40 years to make tea. So don't tell me what you do isn't sacred. You make sure that my teapot always has the greatest tea in it so that I can sit and listen and be neighbors to people." So, the symbolism of the story of foot washing takes many, many, many forms as we go through our lives. And we're taking a little bit of respite today. The world is burning with suffering and injustice. Sometimes the world is literally burning as we see it in the Amazon today. So why stop and reflect on work, on a spirituality of work, and the justice in our daily work, our jobs, our careers, our vocations, the holiness of work? Many of us here I know are retired. I am. So this reflection becomes kind of an echo to our past, a window into a lifetime of doing good with good intentions, and the path then today to making meaning of our lives and meaning in our retirement. As some of us learned from Richard Rohr, the first parts of our life are about identity and achievements and establishing family and friendships and commitments and sort of finding our way in the world. And the second part of life is making sort of a meaning of all of that. What does it all really mean? Because we know, I'm one of those older people, that there's less ahead than there was behind. So we know that work has really changed in the last 40 or 50 years. And work in this country has really changed and changed globally. And spirituality and work and those issues can be really confusing and ambiguous in a capitalist economy. Spirituality, by its essence, is about integration. Spirituality is about integrating our lives. We learn that as we get older. We pull ourselves together, realizing there is less ahead than there is behind. The challenge then with work and spirituality is to pull this all together. But the trends, the difficulties, the streams of Western spirituality combined with capitalism, make this really, really hard. See, Western spirituality and its dualisms separate faith and life. Now, we try to join them together as much as possible here at Shadow Rock. In my experience in living and being a part of faith communities, we do it almost better than anybody else, yet we still fail a little bit, in my view, around work and sexuality. And sexuality is another, something Karen really does a good job with Al. But we need to figure out, there are strains in Western spirituality that developed in the Renaissance, before and after that, about higher things, the intellectual things, the things that separated spirit and matter, that whole dualism that says some things are spiritual and some things are material, infects us when we come to the spirituality of work. And what happens is, that's why it's so difficult for us to connect the two, because we learn to compartmentalize them. That's why we have difficulty talking about politics in church, because some things were of the higher order. They were about salvation and the Spirit. The roots of racism and sexism are in these dualisms, in these separations. The minister, the priest, the person who left the world was the Holy One. But those who worked in the fields, the janitor, why do you think we pay the janitor so much less, the field worker so much less than the engineer? Because we know that certain things are higher and better. Now, that's not to say education isn't good, and engineering isn't good. It's great, and being a minister is good and holy, and all of that. But we came to learn through Western spirituality that spirit and matter were separated. And the closer you got to God, that work became a distraction. Work became a distraction. Being a banker became the separation. Being an accountant became the separation. So we found it difficult to be in the world. And the roots of some of the sexism. So why do you think childcare workers are paid less than software engineers? Well, of course, in a capitalist system, we value things, but inherently, things that were women's work were devalued. The work of peasants. Why do you think financial capital can move all over the world without any questions? Rich billionaires just write a check and their money moves to wherever it needs to be. But human capital, the immigrant, the person whose labor is the sweat of their brow, their skills are the sweat of their brow, they're the ones whose labor is diminished, treated with less value. So, this spirit and matter separation really puts a barrier between us and the holiness of work. And it comes in how we value work, and how we have fights over minimum wage, and how we have all of these kinds of injustices that perpetuate. Now, I'm not suggesting that we pay the software engineer or the business entrepreneur and the janitor the same wage, but I'm saying that we must value the worker and the work, and then begin to think and not have a fight over whether people should have dignified livings. People should have the dignity to make enough money. We ought to value the worker and the work being done enough that people can live in dignity. So, spirituality about making those connections. So the definitions of good and holy work are many, if you look them up on the internet. But good holy work has been defined as good intentions combined with good actions, resulting in good consequences, providing good services like the necessities of life, building up the human community. Let's say that again. Good and holy work is defined as good intentions. We intend to do good, like a software engineer improving communications, or a janitor cleaning up the church after we all leave. Good actions. The things we do actually are like writing a play, or writing a poem, or being the manager of a preschool, or being a doctor or nurse, or being a field worker. What happens to us is that the dualism makes us want to judge things as more valuable, because in a capitalist economy, your value depends upon not who you are, but this value of capitalistic work. And remember, this is thousands of years old that separates this and is underground all of this kind of dualisms in our spirituality. So, good intentions with good actions, with good consequences, with good results, usually in good places. Good stuff continues the power and the beauty of the universe. We are actually, in the spirituality of work, we're sort of co-creating with God, whether it's writing a play or cleaning the toilets. Now, we've learned pretty much in American capitalism and Western spirituality to separate this two. So I'm not surprised that you all have a lot of skepticism today. That's good. Because this is what happens to it. This is the power of the dualism in our lives. This is why we compartmentalize things. This is why it's so easy to pay minimum wage rather than a living wage. Oh, well, the work of the worth. We don't think about the worker and the work and how it participates in creation. This can be really challenging for us as a matter of justice. This is why immigration is such a field of all this, because the field worker, the human capital, the person in the pork factory or the chicken factory is devalued in that work, and they can be, but the employer can be separate. Those roots of separation are in the spirituality of work and how we view work and how we've compartmentalized this. So we value one worker much more than the other. Now again, I'm not saying that we ought to pay the software engineer and the janitor the same. I'm just saying that we need to come to a point where we have to be in justice, in solidarity with each other as workers, where our personal gifts, our personal talents, our temperaments. My friend Gordon's an accountant. I'm about as far away from being an accountant as you can get. But it doesn't make him less or me more. It makes us as workers and the dignity of our work when we do it well with good consequences in a good context, holy and good, and continues the creation of the universe, whether you believe in God or not. So, spouses caring for a sick parent, grandparents doing parenting, teachers and nurses, engineers, accountants, construction workers building houses, caregivers of people with disabilities. And as I've said, it's reflected poorly in our immigration policies. So, today we read the scripture about washing of the feet. And we saw that Jesus had tools of service, his tool of humility, of water, a basin, towels. So the question becomes for us, what were your tools? What are your tools of your service, of your washing of the feet? Is it brilliant management? Brilliant managers are great people of relationships. They know how to honor and empower and lift up other people so they can do their job. Are you good at analytics? Are you good at numbers? Are you good at careful listening like our lady in her teapot? Or are you good at engineering like our quality control engineer who's still trying to figure out? By the way, after the service, the two of them met in the back and hugged. So the challenge for us on Labor Day is to reconcile this compartmentalization, to integrate our spirituality with the holiness of ordinary life, with the sacredness of the universe, to really accept that we are co-creators with a God that you may or may not believe in, but that your skills, your unique talents, your unique gifts are called into the world to build a better world for everybody. That you weren't given great accounting skills like Gordon so you could make a lot of money. If you make a lot of money, that's great. But the whole purpose was to move the universe forward, to write great poetry, to write great music, to celebrate the goodness that is by your unique contribution, no matter what it is, as a playwright, as an accountant, as an engineer, as a janitor, as a field worker, as a carpenter, as a truck driver. By pulling your work together. So what do we leave with today? Our work in the world is a part of our spirituality for building a better world. Some of us have seen those connections for a long time. Some of us don't. We do not have to spiritualize work. It is already sacred and holy. It is that we don't see it that way, that we have separated. These dualisms do not need to be perpetuated. We don't have to spiritualize the world. We know from this church and our beliefs that the world is already holy. For as much pain and suffering and injustice that's out there, the world is filled with goodness and grace. And our work becomes another place, another way, through our dignity, our talents, our goodness, that we build the world up, that we become foot washers for a better world. So the question becomes, the world is burning, but we need to find ways to save it. Our work, even our retirement, can be one of those ways. The question for us is, who do we serve? How do we serve? What are the tools? What are the tools? God is still speaking, and speaking through our work.